I know some students are still kind of getting in here, but I don't want to take too much time away for just waiting. So, hello everybody, welcome to class. This is Danny Favela. He's a really good friend of mine. We met in high school and we were in band together. And Danny did not play tennis, but he was one of my band geek friends for life. And I invited him over to share his story about high school, college, and like his journey through career, and kind of like, end out where he's now. And we'll pause, here and there to talk about, some Q&A stuff for like certain breaks and stuff. So yeah, Danny, go ahead.
All right, all right. So yeah, my name is Danny Favela. Let me go ahead and host disabled participant screen
Oh,
sharing.
sorry. Let me add you as co-host. I'll do Miss Cumplido as well, actually. I always forget to do that.
Let's
Go for
see,
it.
cumplidos. Oh, Keynote. I don't know how to do it with Zoom, but oh well. It's all right. I'll show you guys the raw slides, then you get the insider look. Where we at? Where we at? Finder Keynote. There we go. Oh, I never set up the system preferences. 1 second here. Mm. I would need to restart it. All right. I'll just talk through the slides.
It's all good.
So three things, just according to, you know, Mr. Payan's homie, David Payan's homie. Um, so who am I? I'm a guy who went over to USC after growing up in El Monte with Ewok. That's his nickname. I apologize if that slips in there.
Oh, that's fine.
Uh,
No worries. They know. My students know, anyways.
Okay, good, good. So, I went over to USC, and then I studied computer science. I graduated from there with my computer science degree. Went over to Blizzard Entertainment, actually as a quality assurance tester. So, those people who are stereotyped as playing video games, right? But I loved Blizzard Entertainment so much. I really enjoyed the video games. So I went over there, ended up getting into automated testing, software development, and eventually being given reassignment into some software development engineer tasks, and then eventually getting the associate software engineer position there. After that, Riot Games ended up poaching me for a production role. Producer is kind of a project manager. It's a person who ends up leading a couple teams to coordinate on how to deliver stuff. And after that, I ended up doing a little Kickstarter project of my own and doing a little bit of my own sole proprietorship. I established an LLC. Uh, and one of the projects that I think is most fun right now is I offered cryptocurrency mining. So I would go around and tell my friends, hey, you put in money, I'll buy the hardware, I'll mine
I'm
Litecoin.
having trouble hearing you.
All right. And my Siri thought I was talking to her.
Yeah.
And so I ended up mining some Litecoin for people who ended up investing, distributing out the mined Litecoin appropriate to the investment given, distributed into the wallet. Worked with another guy. He made a script that we put on the hardware to run the mining software and distribute out all the the Litecoins. Kirk was actually in on that, Ewok.
I
So
remember.
another one of our guys. I wrote a couple contract pieces for the Motley Fool. They're a website that does stock investment, and they do some really solid guidance in terms of just safe, really kind of Warren Buffett endorsed investment strategies around stocks and whatnot. And then I joined a little startup called Lootsie. They were doing this novel idea around achievement points as a way to actually redeem real world goods. So I went in there as a software engineer, kind of like the first engineer they hired. Spent 3 years there and ended up being kind of the director there, standing in for the CTO when we let him go. And then Amazon brought me over to Washington. So now I'm living in Seattle. Over all of the stuff that I mentioned before was in Southern California. Blizzard was in Irvine. Riot was in Los Angeles. I stuck around in Los Angeles for that startup too, Culver City. And then now I'm up in Washington. I've been at Amazon 5 years as a software development manager. So I have a couple of teams that end up analyzing and building tools for infrastructure efficiency. So, internally, we got all these teams that end up building services, how they use AWS technologies and how they use services that other teams have built internally is a source of a lot of waste. And so Amazon takes waste pretty seriously. We like to be really efficient with what we do. So my teams build a lot of the tools around looking at that usage, making sure that everyone is kind of efficient with it. We have an internal accountability system that pretty much mirrors money, and and yeah, we've been able to save probably of theoretical dollars, I'll call them, right? Because no one knows the actual AWS rates, right? Like the costs that Amazon uses to serve companies that use our technologies to host their own technologies. The actual margins on that, super secret, way above my level. And so, the in terms of the internal money's representation, there's probably a couple hundreds of millions of dollars that we've saved over the years for serving Amazon.com features and teams and other services.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. Um, yeah, like I said, you have a very unique, aspect of how you kind of migrated through, first of all, coming from like myself, not very financially wealthy people
Mhm.
living in Almani, which was a pretty crazy time, town at the time or city at the time. Can you talk a little bit more about like that part? So the
Mhm.
Almani part of high school, like how was it back then to kind of how it is like how you see it now, I guess.
Yeah. So in El Monte in Mountain View, it was interesting to see the demographics, right? The city itself, I would say, in terms of there was a racial and a cultural breakdown, right? There was a kind of there's the Mexicans and then there's the Asians, right? And so that was very much prevalent in the whole demographic. And so there were a lot of activities that we had and a lot of cultures to kind of navigate and avoid. And on my side of El Monte, because I know Iwak, you lived on the other side, kind of the Crans side.
Yep.
We had more crime, I would say, especially growing up. We had gangsters. I think El Monte Flores by that point was kind of winding down, but we still had activity. So there was a lot of temptation to do as like my older brothers did, stealing bikes and stuff like that. But there were also activities in school which were really awesome for community, for productivity, and there was a lot of value in that. And I think a big part for me was the prevalence of band, which Iwak already mentioned. Academic Decathlon was another group that was really, really fun. The teachers were a big part of making that happen. I also went to church. Church was a big part of community for me, and in terms of learning from people who, you look at them and you're like, oh man, those old people, right? Like that's constantly what I hear. I feel very lucky because I never really viewed them that way. The stories that I would hear from them in such a personal context and the way that church works, makes it so that I saw those people and I knew like, oh, I'm gonna be that someday, right? Like that will be me, and I will have stories, and I will be regretting how quickly time went, right? And so, and so those were big parts of my high school life, and the teachers were a really big thing, right? We had Mr. Crepes, we had Mr. Bolin, we had Pursley, right? These guys were putting in time after school to facilitate the activities we were doing. We had Mr. Kim, we had the people who were basically saying, I mean, Bolin invited us to his home for the academic decathlon activities, right? Probably wasn't, allowed or normal, but that was something that we got to do. And it felt really cool to be able to hang out, on weekends and basically study for this test competition, and in band, the band director had to go with us and we went on trips and we went to parades and we ended up, I ended up running sectionals for my section. I play alto sax and building kind of that community, building that, I guess I would say now, if someone looked at it from the outside, like kind of a support structure where people were communicating, talking to each other, and really enjoying being real, not just like shallow stuff. It's like, no, we're all here for a really directed purpose. That was really critical. Nowadays I fear for that, right? You know, in terms of funding for programs that are extracurricular that way, in terms of the effects of coronavirus. You know, I'm hoping everyone here has that support group, has that sense of community, you know, somewhere, if it's church, if it's band, if it's academic decathlon, right? Somewhere people are connecting still, or with the teachers, you know, like Ewok, I guess you would know, you know, how far, or, you know, what it is that you can do to facilitate some sense of community, or different teachers, you know, able to do whatever they're able to do. So I'm hoping those things aren't lost. I guess that's one comparison I would give there.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's a good point for that because it is true how things have changed over the time, especially, like you said right now with Corona.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, so what was the I know you're a huge USC, like, but what was your push to get you to USC?
That was money. It was money, and it wasn't in terms of like, oh, going to USC will make me money. It was USC was willing to give me the most money.
Oh,
So USC, because it's a private institution, I believe they were able to really give me a generous financial package. I know that costs nowadays are astronomical, so I hope no one gets like, you know, angry at hearing this. But USC gave me a package such that I only had to borrow $5,000 every year. Right. You know,
that's
so I ended up.
fantastic.
I know I graduated with a $16,000 bill, right? Because looking back at it now, I would have probably been better off borrowing the full extent of everything they could possibly give me for, you know, the low interest rates for students, right, on
Yeah.
loans. But I'm like, no, you know, I don't want to be in debt, you know, too much. And so I ended up with 16K in terms of, you know, getting a 4 year on campus, you know, experience. So that was the biggest driver. I got accepted to Berkeley. I got accepted to a couple other schools, Tulane and New Orleans as well. And all of them ended up being more expensive in terms of the actual money coming in, right? Even though they were cheaper technically, you know, I got the best package from USC. So, you know, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh no, I could never do it at this private institution, sometimes they're the ones who are willing to actually go out and give you a real, you know, big helping hand.
Yeah.
Definitely do not stray away from that just because public institutions are cheaper. Yeah,
Mhm.
so USC ended up giving me the best package, and that was the defining factor.
That's cool because I usually tell my kids like go where the money is. I mean, I don't care that you go to USC, UCLA, or not UCLA, Danny. Sorry,
I
uh,
know, it's
UC
terrible.
San Diego, Berkeley, wherever school is offering you the best deal because they all have similar education systems, and you can find your path at any school, but unless they specifically have a like degree or major you absolutely have to do and they only offer it there, I always tell my kids go where the money is because I mean it's true, getting out of, like for example, Danny came out with $16,000 and I owe over 60, and I went to what is it, Cal States and stuff like that too, I all that stuff. So there's a big difference in that. I didn't know any about all this scholarship stuff. I didn't apply for anything when I was younger because I didn't know. But I wish now, I mean, going back, I wish I knew what I knew, I wish I knew then what I knew now because it would have helped me out a lot for all that stuff.
Mhm.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good note on scholarships, and different financial offices have different policies around how they handle scholarships and whatnot. What was interesting about USC is they were like, hey, we expect you to take some money, right? So I had scholarships lined up, and they were like, oh, well, cool. Then we get to reduce our financial package for you by that amount. So it was interesting because they even facilitated kind of a dynamic of, hey, pay attention to just like your studies. Like, just don't, like, you're going to take some debt. You know, this is
yeah,
kind of like the level, you know, you're expected to put in 5,000 a year. And even if you bring in, you know, this other scholarship stuff, like, you know, it's going to reduce, it's not going to change things. Right. And
yeah,
so, yeah, some of these offices have really good packages, and follow the money is a great way to look at it.
yeah. Especially now they have this new blue and I think it's like blue and gold package now that if your parents make less than, I don't remember if it was 80,000 or 75,000 a year, then all the universities are California universities are free to you. You just pay room and board, books, and stuff like that. But the actual tuition is free now. So that's a cool program that they have now that they didn't have back then.
Nice.
Yeah, it still makes it like expensive because, you know, living in LA or wherever you're going to go is still pricey, but it's $80,000. Thank you, Joel. But it's still kind of awesome. You know, USC, of course, since it's a private institution, is not included in that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but they do have other offers and other programs that you can apply for to get into.
Yeah. I think on that note, I would say just mainly don't eliminate an option based on perception, right? Because
Yeah.
even though it's like, oh, there's the blue and gold package for state schools, you might still be better off with a private institution's funding, right? USC is a good example. They got the alumni network. They pretty much hit you hard of like, hey, you want to donate? Hey, you want to donate? And so the thing that I'm donating into is that sort of funding, right?
Cool. Very cool.
And people to come in and be able to go to the school and fund their own financial packages. So don't eliminate anything.
For sure. And then talking more about UCLA. So you can you explain again your major and like what classes you needed to take to like kind of continue pursue that kind of degree?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna have my key here in a second, so and I realized I could probably do video here, maybe
Oh, there
outside
you go.
a little bit. So what's up? This is me. This is Danny. I do got the SC shirt, you know, appropriately.
Of course.
So the computer science major, I ended up coming into USC with a kind of undeclared position, so I didn't have to decide. And I spent the first 2 years kind of going between business and taking, you know, even looking into law as a possibility. Uh, Business ended up not really appealing to me. And then when I did like economy classes and whatnot, I was like, that's kind of boring. It didn't really engage me. So I ended up choosing computer science on the basis of the fact that in El Monte, I could think of 0 Mexican Americans who had a computer science degree, right? And
Very
I saw it as
true.
yeah, I saw it as a way to kind of, you know, pay back USC for the investment. It's like, all right, you put in money, you know, you'll get kind of the statistical anomaly. And also video games was a big part of the decision there. You know, I was like, I want to know how to code up Zelda, you know, like what goes into that. So ended up taking classes that have to do with computer science. There's the general education stuff. There's physics, which I was terrible at, but which is actually relevant to some programming, especially in video games, where you need to figure out how to represent physics in a fictional world, you know, that you create from scratch. You end up getting into higher level classes around how like operating systems work, how you know, you end up having memory allocation. And so that's kind of the advanced classes. You have these group projects. Had a bad experience with someone from Boeing who actually came in, was really lazy, and then we had to kind of tattle on him in terms of his lack of contribution. So that was so it's interesting. You end up running into these kind of different people and these different topics over time.
Very cool. Very cool.
Fill in the dead air for a second. I'm gonna move inside.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. All right, yeah, well, so everybody just think of some questions while he get transfers over to inside of his house for now. Just kind of a side note. So like, you know, he said that we lived in different parts of El Monte, even though it is you know, it's a relatively big city. I really like the nature noise. Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure he's in Seattle, so I'm pretty sure it's cold. I was gonna ask if that was actually snow on his back, you know, because I know it gets really cold up there. But I was saying like with Almani, like when we were growing up, it was not the nicest of neighborhoods. My bike got stolen a couple times, you know, and definitely like chains on the bikes were a big thing. Like I would ride my bike to school sometimes, and we would chain the bikes up like with locks, and then they would actually lock the bike. The school would actually lock the bike cage, so nobody could actually get in there and all stuff like that. It was pretty crazy. There were certain streets you just avoided because you knew certain people lived there and you didn't want to like, you know, deal with any of that stuff. So that was definitely a thing growing up for where we lived and stuff. I'm sure you guys have, well, I hope not similar situations, but I'm sure everybody has something like that in their life that they can see. So I'm gonna open up. Does anybody have any questions to ask so far? What's been said? No, pretty straightforward. Okay. I guess we've been doing such a good job that no questions are needed so far, Danny. Like
Maybe I got a boring life. I don't know. I mean, like I'm willing to
I
hear.
didn't want to go there, but yeah. No. All
Danny.
right. So
Yeah,
I,
there's
I know a big thing for my students, I want to tell them to kind of like enjoy college. So can you talk about how like your I know you had a great time in like band and your social life in college was really different because of you had that connection with those people. But can you talk a little bit about like that?
Sure. One of the things I got to do was be in the USC Trojan marching band. That was a lot of fun. It ended up being, again, a really, really cool community. And if you end up seeing an opportunity to join an organization that really represents what your college is about, or people who are just like really frantically about something, I think that that's a really cool way to go, because you end up learning a different culture, right? And I think, and at least personally, I feel like learning about different cultures is very, very, very advantageous, because it helps you connect with a lot of people. One of the reasons church was so important to me growing up, and the USC band was important, and USC in general, is USC kind of has this cultish aspect to it, right? You know, it's like everyone who goes to USC is like, we're the best. We're, you know, like UCLA sucks. Like everyone else is like, you know, terrible. We're amazing, right? There's almost a cultish aspect to it. And much like church, it is purely based on the beliefs of the people, right? And basically, if you have a group of people who are acting in a common alignment, even if the thing is intangible, even if it's not something that you can prove, like you get to experience that and you get to be a part of creating something that otherwise like wouldn't exist, you know, reasonably. So, so it's an interesting dynamic. That was probably the number one thing that I learned from the USC band. The USC band itself was an organization that um, I would say was organizationally structured like a business. They went out, they did gigs, they got paid for these gigs. We, you know, made appearances in like with who is it? Like I played on the field with the drummer of System of a Down, right? And that
Ooh,
was pretty
very
fun.
cool.
Um, they played at Coachella with maybe Outcast, I think, but I want to say it's another, like there's a bunch of gigs like that, right, which happen. And so it was also structured like a business. You had the director, this old man who was like, yeah, band, don't do that. You know, he's like giving out these directions from on high, and you've got at each instrument level, you know, basically like a squad, a 4-person squad that ends up doing a small portion of the greater whole for the show, right? And, you know, the music parts and everything. So you ended up having like this overall organization and these subcultures, these subsets of the organization that ended up functioning independently in like a very distributed manner. So that kind of thing gave me an early intro into how businesses are structured. And that was not something I was expecting in a USC band environment, right? So those kinds of learnings, I think, can come from an organization that's trying to make things happen, right? My little brother's in a frat. I think that he has fun with that. And it was a big part of his identity. And yeah, for me, I think, you know, there were things like a cappella groups. I would have loved to do an a cappella group, right? It wasn't something I had time for, but that kind of activity, you know, is really, really cool to connect and make a just general network connections, right? And then also to enjoy yourself with a consistent set of people.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So that's kind of the thing we've been kind of like trying to explain to them too. Like find your passion and then go with the people that have that same passion and make, you know, because like you said, when minds align, you kind of thrive that way and it kind of opens it up to, you know, new venues. Maybe you find people that are into new things like just like you are, and then, you know, share your passions out and makes it easier to experience life. And especially in college, it's a little safer too when you're in college and stuff. Fantastic.
That's a good
You
point.
know, yeah.
That is a good point. I mean, like, I hope this doesn't encourage anyone to do anything crazy, but when you're a minor, your parents are responsible for the bad things you do.
Yeah.
That's kind of a free pass. I've seen more well-off cultures, I'll say, right? Because I don't know how politically correct I got to be in here, but more well-off cultures in the world that end up getting away with that, right? Like the kids will do some severe stuff, and it's like, wow, they're still completely well-off. What the heck, right? um, and when you're in college, it's another kind of free pass. Yeah, as is being recorded, so I won't go into some activities that we did, but but in terms of enjoying college, there's a bit of leeway, associated with the activities that you do, and it's okay to just try out different group and not be a part of it. It's not the end of the world, right? If I had gone to the a cappella group and sucked because my voice isn't like well enough for singing publicly, that's okay. I could go to the band, or I could go to another a cappella group, or I could go to there was a USC Latinos and Chicanos club, and things like that. Like there's always these other options. So it's never the end of the world if you end up not doing one, and it's completely, I want to say, kind of permissive in terms of trying something, failing, or not even failing, but just even not liking it, and then switching away. Take advantage of that.
Yeah, it's the same thing like we talked about before. Not being afraid to try new things, because being okay with failure, it's huge. Like you said, like maybe not making my voice is not great. Who knows? I know for sure I'm not a great singer. I try, and I think I'm the best singer when I'm in the car by myself. But other people in the car, I sing very low so nobody can hear me. So, but it's okay. It's okay to go out there and take risks as long as they're calculated risk. With everything. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions about college before we start moving on to like the career stuff?
Yeah, one thing I'm sad about is that my slides, wasn't showing up because it didn't have the right permissions. But at the end of it, I directly say, please ask questions, chat, connect with me on things like LinkedIn or whatever, right? Expand your network with me, and then also video, right? Like I'm looking around at some of these names, and I'm wondering, like, what is the number one pressing thing that some of you have? Like, is your life just completely set and awesome, and you have absolutely nothing that you're worried about or struggling with that maybe you want input on, right? Is everything perfect for you guys? Because if so, cool.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Any questions about college life so far? Anything like that? They're usually a little bit more talkative than this.
It's a Monday morning kind of deal. Everybody had a rough weekend.
Maybe. No, okay. So, all right. So you talked about how you worked for Blizzard and then you moved on to Riot Games. So what were your responsibilities at Blizzard? And then what were your responsibilities at Riot Games? And then the pros and cons, I guess, of both.
Mm-hmm. So at Blizzard, I joined as a QA tester. That was a person who ends up going through different versions of a game, right? At that time, it was World of Warcraft. Was just getting started. And I think it was at the first expansion. And so people at those companies put together test plans to basically verify that the things that the developers have done end up working as expected, right? So when things go out, the game doesn't crash. You end up finding out that the functionality, maybe isn't working as expected, or maybe it just is not fun at all, right? And that was something that requires planning. It requires intention. Sometimes it requires big groups, right? Especially with games that have multiple people who are in a raid and whatnot. So then you have from that, I was able to go ahead and automate some of those tests, right? Because I knew computer science, I was able to say, like, all right, cool. Like logically, like logic and decision making in terms of how you implement something in a computer is a skill in and of itself, and you benefit a lot from the algorithmic learnings that you have in computer science. So when you have that, even the designers are like trying to struggle with a for loop, right? Like I imagine maybe everyone nowadays knows like a for loop in basic coding and whatnot, right? Maybe. If you don't, it's just, a logical iteration on something until a condition is met, right? You tell the computer, do this thing until you reach the max, right? That kind of stuff what applied to a game, if you ever use like a game editor, ends up being very powerful because now you're not having to create a bunch of units in these one individual cases, and it's easier to maintain in the future. So that ended up eventually getting me to a software engineer position, where I was building things like a localization tool. So the thing that ended up storing the different words in different languages for Diablo 3 when that came out, and different survey tools for feedback to be gotten from like BlizzCon attendees and stuff like that. And then learning about how to deliver again, like how do you do software development in general? And from learning to do software development in general, I went over to the Game Developers Conference, met some people from Riot, we partied. That was a really fun night, actually. Like, definitely go to conferences, enjoy your times. Like, there's recruiters who want to recruit you as you know, as you guys go into college. There are people who want to talk to you, right? They go to these conferences. If you're, female, go to the women's conference, right? For like, the Grace Hopper conference, right? If you know about industry events, go to them. Like, companies have recruiting channels and they want to talk to people like us, So I really recommend going to them. It's really advantageous. And there I just happened to talk to Riot Games people socially. So we had a good time and they were like, hey, would you ever want to come to work for Riot? Which, to be honest, that's what their aim was the entire time, right? These companies have their parties so that people can come in and they can poach you. Like, that's the purpose. And so they ended up hiring me as someone who was managing the teams. And over there, what I was doing was basically setting out the milestones and kind of setting the different tasks, working with the engineers, the artists, to work on 2 projects. One was kind of a Summoner's Rift revamp for the level because it was really inefficient. So if you've ever played League of Legends, that one level, it was really outdated and it was really performing badly. So it became compatible with a lot of low spec machines, especially in Asia. I think they use a lot of those min spec machines. And then also to deliver the artistic revamp of it, and a kind of championing editing tool, because Riot Games at that point was not very fast in terms of how it allowed their artists to work on stuff. So that was the difference there in terms of the responsibilities there. Before I was kind of coding, actually, working against builds. And then as a producer at Riot, I was more taking care of how the project executed, coordinating with the different engineers and the artists so that we could end up making progress on these milestones and making sure that these solutions kind of went forward. More project management on that side.
Yeah, and I told my students how my addiction to World of Warcraft and how you fed my addiction by giving me a year free of WoW for Christmas one year, and like, and I was like, yeah, tapping into that addiction, but that was also super awesome. But cool. I knew like a gist of what you were doing, but I didn't know all the details of it. So that's actually really kind of cool hearing that, like, you went through all that stuff. Wow. One student asked a question in chat a little bit ago, said, what advice do you have for someone who does not know what their passions are? And then they put asking for a friend, haha. But, I'm pretty sure it's for them.
And it's a good question. So I would say that, I feel like the right answer to give is like, oh, try lots of things. But having grown up, tell your friend that, sometimes it can be limited, right? Like the first time I walked into an REI up here and saw a bunch of people who did not look like me, I didn't even know what was bothering me, at the time. But you got like these $500 kind of lifeguard, what do you call them? The life vests? Yeah, the life jackets. And you've got these paddle boards that are $1,000 to $2,000. And it hit me when I looked over and I'm like, oh my God, that family of 5 has 5 boards, $1,000 to $2,000 each. They're each putting on like their life jackets and they're like, oh yeah, little Timmy, does this feel good? I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, whoa. And it was a cultural shock, right? So I feel like the advice of like, oh yeah, just try everything is expensive, right? I like talking to people. I like knowing like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? What are you enjoying? And with social media, I think it's a lot of noise nowadays, and a lot of people maybe don't put the right front in terms of what's real, like what's true. And so if you talk with people, typically you'll get into something that you enjoy, because everyone's kind of living a lot of the things that are important to them. There's the things people say are important to them, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm all about this thing, right? I'm all about this political thing and this great cause and all this stuff. But there's the things that people do on the day to day, which is like, oh, you actually care about money because you're doing your job, right? Like you're doing it. You're not going out and then, doing this crazy stuff. Like, what are you actually about? And I would say find happy people. If you find happy people typically are doing something that's really enjoyable to them. And then you can usually follow that thread. And what you'll usually find is there is a whole deep area around what they do that leads to other sub activities or other activities that is like, oh, wow, I'm interested in that. Like, let's say you don't like necessarily like newspaper and journalism and stuff like that, right? But you have a friend who's like always like going around like, like covering the stuff, and you're like, wow, they're really happy. And you look into what they do and you start looking at what they do as a process. Then you realize, wow, like they would benefit from like some photos to go along with their pieces, right? Like maybe they run this online website or blog or something, right? And then you end up having something that says, oh, like that, like they're not really good at photography. I love like that. That would be really cool. Oh, I got a phone, I'll end up doing these shots. This looks really well for that. Hey, let me help you out. Right. So once you talk to happy people, you end up having exposure to processes that they do. And then you yourself are like, how can I help? And that leads to a lot of good passions that, or in my opinion, it can lead to a bunch of good passions that not only are things that will appeal to you in interest, but will actually help people, which feeds, it's like a cycle at that point, right? When you're helping other people and you're just like, yeah, let me give you some photos there. Then you can be like, hey, how about you pay me for my time, right? And then suddenly your passion is becoming your job, right? Or some sort of source of income. Yeah. So that's what I would advise. I hope that's useful. I had a direct message from someone that asked if I have any favorite projects that I've done so far. My favorite projects, I think I would have to think about that. Again, for me, it's more about people, right? There's people that I remember, like back in high school, we had the Swing Kings, right? Like we ended up playing in a little band, where we did swing projects. When I played the alto sax in high school, it was my section, right? I was very proud of my section, and Iwa can attest to this, right? Like we were known for being really close in the alto sax section, like they're weird close. And in terms of professionally, I dig the clout, around like World of Warcraft and stuff like that, like that's pretty cool. But my favorite projects are actually probably where I promote my people, right? Where I get to like brag about them. I get to say, hey, here's the case for promoting this engineer from this level to this level. They did this project, they did that project, they did this project, and there's a whole. This is the exercise I run through with my directs so that I don't say anything confidential. Let's imagine all of us are in a company, right? Like I'm the CEO, I'm funding us, I'm finding ways for us to get money. All of y'all are leading, different teams in our company here. How do you decide who to hire? How do you decide who to promote? We got $2.5 million, all right, for all our teams. And you got your wages as well to contend with, right? And we got to hire people. So what kind of systems do you put in place? And so when you start thinking about it from that angle, you start realizing there's a lot of logistical aspects in terms of running an organization or running a business. And you have to have a equitable, fair system that isn't just one-offs, right? Like, if we have Adrian who comes up and is like, oh yeah, no, this guy's good. Like I got this person, they're really good. Like we got to promote them, right? Then maybe Miranda would be like, oh no, I don't know. And like this person is really good. Like they deserve the raise, more than the other person. So actually participating in an effective system that a company may have, and then getting people promoted, I think are probably among my favorite projects there. And that's probably what I would say. But in terms of clout and recognition, oh man, I love World of Warcraft. I love League of Legends, being able to brag about that stuff. Amazon is pretty big in terms of just Amazon.com. And internally, we've done some projects to facilitate a lot of streamlining. Big companies always have a lot of opportunities to streamline. That's extremely satisfying to me, right? And so once you get in, then you end up having that chance to be like, wow, that's really obvious, like, let's make people happier there. They could really do without having to deal with this kind of burden over there.
That's awesome, because I do try to tell them too, like, if you find a job you love to do, you never have to work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So like going with that same kind of, maybe like finding happy people and seeing what they're doing, trying to find and get way into that. That's great advice.
Mm-hmm.
I did have another question. A student says, which would you recommend for those still figuring out their career areas? Community college, then transfer, or undeclared in a university?
My answer would have been different. I think when I was going to school, I think there's a lot of value in the on-campus experience. I loved going to USC, so I might be particularly biased. And I met a lot of good people as part of that experience. If I were to take a good hard look at it, even for USC, right, with the coronavirus environment, with a lot of the changes and the limitations around proximity and people connecting, I probably would go the community route, right? The community college route, both in terms of cost. There's a lot of good professors at community colleges. This was a chat in our Discord group. We have a El Monte Discord group and a bunch of different channels, but we were talking about how there were a lot of solid professors, especially in the summer terms for community colleges. So you get a good education, especially for the general requirements, right? So you can spend some time there. And in terms of deciding your career in general, because I think you asked about that as well, right? So the community college route would help for getting you exposed to that. But for choosing your career, I think that's related to the passions question, right? Because passions are cool, but like I love to draw, but drawing is not going to get me money. Right, like it's just not going to happen. There was a moment in my Blizzard tenure where I went to what's his name? God, I can't believe I've forgotten it. But his moniker is Samwise, right? Samwise Didier, yeah. He's the artist who started off like the Blizzard kind of style. He was the art director.
Cool.
I was doing an assignment for the StarCraft 2 group, before they launched. And I was going to reach the end of the assignment. And I said, I'm going to regret it if I never talk to this guy and show him kind of the fanboy stuff that I've done in terms of the sketchbook, right, that I had. And I walked into his office and I'm like, hey, I'm just wondering, like, I really just want to show you some of the stuff. I want to let you know that you're awesome, share this sketchbook, with you. And I did. And he was so thrilled. He was so thrilled with it. And at the end of it, he's like, yeah, hey, like, would you ever want to switch over to, art, instead of like, like the computer science oriented stuff, the programming engineer kind of careers. And I had to think about it because it makes me really happy. It really does. But show some of your art. I got, oh man, the sketchbooks are over there. Maybe I will later. But it was something that I had to think long and hard about, right? So eventually when you find the passions that do bring you money, like that equation is just wonderful, right? And I think for me, computer science actually wasn't it. I got to admit, like I went into computer science for the reasons that I talked about earlier. And then I didn't even use it. I went into a QA position. My mom was so sad because I had an open offer for like, at that time, $50,000 to $60,000, which was more than my mom like ever imagined, getting paid, and then I had Blizzard's QA position, which was not offering that. It was like $30,000 to $40,000, right? And it didn't necessarily require computer science, but I'm like, oh, I'm going to go into my passion. I'm going to do that. And she was crying. She was like, oh no. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it ended up leading to this place, right? So even like your passions and what makes money sometimes can feel like they're at odds. But for me, I've actually found a very unique perspective that I bring to my teams because of my background and because of my actual passion, which is people, right? It's more around people. And I love the people management aspect of my job and really helping them grow. And the fact that I can back that up with the engineering experience that I have is fantastic. Because when they're struggling, I can be like, all right, hey, tell me about the design. Tell me about how you're thinking about this implementation. Okay, here's this algorithm. Okay, hey, and I know kind of the questions to ask to foster their own learning, right? Because I went through it myself. And so even though computer science itself wasn't my passion, I actually was always kind of behind some of my other peers, right? These people who ended up going to like high schools that are technical high schools. They knew everything pretty much before the class was there. You know, and you know, in some points like helped me a lot in terms of just saying, hey, here's how you Google correctly to find the information you want, right? I wasn't stellar at it and I wasn't necessarily passionate about it, but it ended up leading to, again, a subset of the whole thing where it's like, wow, everyone is so logical and so kind of dry around how they execute engineering work that there's this huge gap in terms of learning, fostering, mentoring people, which I was able to kind of fill in there. And it's greatly valued at my current position, which is something that makes me really happy. So long drawn out answer, going back to the point, I would recommend community college. Expose yourself to some of these paths. Don't necessarily limit yourself by just your passion or just by money, right? But see if you can find something in something that you are somewhat interested in, something that is somewhat profitable, and then find the notes of your passion there, right? It's not the end of your life. It really isn't. There, people graduate and they end up not going into the place that into something associated with their degree, right? You can use what you learn to apply it to a different area, and that's, to be honest, I think that's actually more beneficial than just thinking of it like, I'm going to take this one route, and is it the correct route? Oh no, now I'm stuck. Like, you're going to be fine if you end up going forward and at least learning something that you're like, this is valuable. I can deal with this. Or at least that's my route. Is it valuable? I can deal with this. It seems like I'm okay enough at this. And then, oh, here's a place where I can apply it really well. You know, it ends up okay. Yeah.
Great point, Danny. Because that's, I mean, especially now, most of my kids are very undecided what they want to do. There's very few of them that are like, oh yeah, Mister, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a veterinarian. There's some of them that kind of really kind of know, but I would say about maybe 80% of my students are very still kind of picking between 10 things, or not even have a list of things to pick from. So I like that. I like your perspective on how you're looking at this. It goes to a lot of the way my teachings are. So I'm glad we're meshing there.
It's gonna be all right.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got some other direct messages as well.
Go for it.
All right. So someone asked, what was one of the most hard to accomplish but most gratifying milestones in your career? One of the there's two that come to mind immediately. Well, three. One of them was actually in college. The hardest course was operating systems. And again, that's like low level. How do you actually allocate files, bytes, you know, different things within the computer system? How do you operate within this framework that, you know, someone else has built and you got to learn? Ended up being really hard, a group project, again, with that Boeing engineer that I mentioned. But it ended up, you know, getting through with a partner that I did have as well. It was a group of three, and the two of us really worked at it. And there were a lot of late nights. It was, there's a lot of small satisfactions that you get when you end up iterating on something and seeing the incremental results. I always endorse that, right? And so eventually it was like, yes, we did it. We reached the point of being able to complete the project, making it behave in the way that an operating system does, creating files, you know, allocating them appropriately, not crashing, not erroring out when you end up, you know, deallocating and So all of those things in that project. The other two instances that were very hard, but were ultimately most gratifying, were when I had to kind of let people go, like manage people out of the team who were not performing, right? That's always a hard conversation. It always sucks when your manager is like, hey, you're not doing well. But what I've learned is that it's worse when they don't, because then at the end of the day, they have to let go of people who are not doing well. So there were two cases. One was, just to keep this confidential, I'm not going to say whether this was at Amazon or at Lutzi or anywhere else, that I've been at. It could have been everywhere, right? Could have been nowhere. Maybe I'm making it up, but to answer this question, I'll at least make up this scenario. There was a guy who was kind of exhibiting a little bit of sexism in their behavior, and that was not cool. From my level, I was able to kind of detect that, and he was especially frustrating one of my very valued team members, and it was really, really hard to basically try to coach someone on a subjective point, right? Because this is behavior. This is like, oh, they believe they're doing something completely fine. And they're acting logically, and they're acting like, oh, they're pointing to these things that are like, no, this. And eventually they left, right? And that was really hard. But ultimately, the freedom that allowed on the team, especially for the person who was most affected by that person's behavior, oh my goodness, like it was so rewarding to basically see that dynamic on my team just unlocked. That was extremely gratifying. And another case too, where I had to give performance feedback incrementally and basically say, hey, this stuff isn't cutting it. We need to like work on this particular aspect. And the person was struggling. They weren't very good at the particular things that were needed from them. And eventually, after a bit of a process, they ended up leaving as well. But they were so much happier. They were basically liberated, right? Like the thing that made it so gratifying is realizing that when it's not a good fit, it's great to leave. It's actually very wonderful to not be in a culture that doesn't match what you want. And so those were the most hardest and gratifying milestones in my career. And it is a milestone, right? Especially if you're doing management, if you're doing direct leadership at a company, to have to let someone go, right? You're not going to get hiring perfect 100% of the time. People are going to get disgruntled. They're going to want change. They're humans. They're people. They grow. So even with that, hopefully that gives some of you encouragement, because I'm hearing the theme of like, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. Things move on. It's okay. You can go on, you can make a decision, but whatever you do, I think I would say just go all in, right? Like go all in when you go in on it. And then you'll find out real fast. You'll find out fastest if you go all in on these things, because then you'll be like, all right, I tried it. I went all in. I'm not about that life. I'm going to switch, And so that's kind of the connection that I would also draw from that. So there was another question, and I apologize if I miss any. I think I got them all here. Another question. What about leadership, which for myself, I would. So leadership, I think the question here is about how do you handle leadership, at a job, and how do you improve your leadership at a job, right? So if you're going to be a leader, how do you kind of improve the stance or maybe the impression as a leader? Let me know if, for the person who sent me that leadership question, if I got that wrong, but I'll start answering that one for now. Leadership is kind of a subjective thing. I think I like Amazon's answer most in my experience. When I came to Amazon, they didn't have a mission statement. They had leadership principles. These are available online, so I don't mind talking about them, but they basically say, hey, we're going to pay you, with stock. You're coming here to make Amazon like more successful as a business because you are an owner. And that really resonated with me because I had just come from a startup where that was 100% of the value, right? Like you go to a startup, it's like, hey, some buddies and I thought of this idea. We think it's going to be valuable. They have the connections or expertise to fund us, to get us money. And then they've got the skills to actually make the idea happen. Let's get together and try and do this, right? But we don't have funding right now. So it's a high risk in terms of financial stability, but it's a high reward in terms of potential value. Like 99% of startups fail though, right? And a lot of it is not like, there's no shortage of ideas in the world. It's all about execution. And as I've gone through, companies like Blizzard, established companies, cool companies, with these kind of cultures and domains that are very slick, and the startup and now Amazon. I really like Amazon's stance, which is they define what they expect from their leaders, right? And if you've done any programming, or even if you haven't, right? If you think of different apps on your phone, right, they can potentially talk to each other. They can give, data to the other in a very clean way. And if you use the iOS system, if you use Apple, then Apple is really, really strict about how they can talk to each other. If you use an Android device, it's like almost like a free-for-all, right? Like everything asks for all your permissions, and then it tries to like detect, like, was Facebook running over here? Was Instagram running over here? Facebook knows if you're using Twitter, right? Because, on the Android operating system, all that is kind of more open, right? Whereas in iOS and Apple, these apps are kind of locked away from each other, right? So having the clean interface between these apps to say, hey, app A, if you want to get information about someone's Snapchat account, right? Maybe get their Bitmoji that shows up in Venmo, then here's the information required for that. Either it goes direct from the app, from Snapchat to Venmo, or it goes to a database that they agree on where they're like, hey, Snapchat owns this Bitmoji data. Venmo can go ahead and call the service to say, hey, give us the information that we need, right? And that interface is what I want to call attention to, even though I know it may not seem related to this leadership question, right? Because as an engineer, I have found a huge pleasure and ease in maintaining code that has clean interfaces so that the different components that you build, the different apps that you have, know how to communicate with other apps. They know how to communicate with services that give them the data they need. And when it's not a free-for-all, it's very easy. It's very orderly. It's very clean. Leadership at Amazon, the leadership principles have basically provided that interface so that when I, as someone on some team in Amazon, which is very big, talk to another team, I can say, hey, here's what I need from you. And even though we don't know anything about each other's products or needs or anything, I expect them to be leaders in a way that is defined in this clean interface, basically, between these organizations, right? So then I can say, like, some of the things are like bias for action, deliver results, earn trust, customer obsession. If someone if a team is working on something and they say, hey, we don't have time for your project right now, but I'm building the next project that is going to build a lot of value for the customer, I can say, hey, I need you to talk to why you're not interested in being customer obsessed right now, right? Like, this feature is literally going to change the lives of our customers, right? And in a lot of cases, there's some features do, right? Like, let's say even something like Prime Wardrobe, right? Like if you have like these fashion things, like there's a market for that, right? And there's teams that care very much about that. Those people who are working on that can go engage another team and say, like, hey, here's what I need. And if they experience any sort of conflict, or if they have resolutions to make, they can basically say, hey, like, here's what we expect, right? Like, why they say, oh no, we're just not interested in that right now. We're trying to figure out the next algorithmic improvement in our code. And we say, hey, that's cool. That's really great for frugality, but is that frugality really going to outdo the customer obsession here? Like, when are you going to deliver that? Why isn't that, like, why have you not delivered the results on that yet? Right? I just need you to give me this particular data so I can do my feature, right? I need you to be more customer obsessed. And when you have those kinds of definitions, it helps. And I'm not saying that Amazon has the perfect kind of framework on that. And I really respect, actually, in their culture, these are the leadership principles, unless you know better ones. That unless you know better ones is kind of like the thing that I really resonate with. My whole life has been like, all right, until I know better, this is kind of where I can apply something all in. But at Amazon, if you have these leadership principles, it really helps. So in your case, maybe if you have, for the person who sent the message, if you want to improve your leadership, think about what it means to be a leader, right? In the context that you're operating in. If you have a team, even if it's in a project, right? Like, do you want to be the leader because it's like, oh, this person has to command something, we need to have a direction, we need to have all these things. If you dig into the whys of that, you're probably just getting to the point of, I'm feeling scared when I think of not delivering on this project. And I'm not experiencing the assurance that I need. I need assurance from these other people to make sure that we actually make progress on this, right? Then you don't need to be a leader who's kind of a jerk. You don't need to be like stubborn or anything like that. You're just looking for something, and the other people can participate in that. And they can say, oh, yeah, we can give you this assurance in this way. Yeah, we can lay out some milestones, right? So think about what it means to be a leader and why you're doing it. And I think that it will really help improve your leadership, because what you'll find is your idea of leadership is either aligned or not aligned with the company you work for, with the group you're in, with the friends you have, with the project you're working on, everything, right? And sometimes that's cool. We all probably have our friends where it's like, you're not actively saying, all right, gang, let's go over here. All right, we're going to go get boba now, right? Like, it's just kind of like, all right, we all kind of dig this, let's like this is what we do every week. It's chill. And then it gets to the point where it's like, hey, why do we even do this? I don't know. We just always do. And we always chill. We play cards. We're all just having fun, but if you artificially have your idea of leadership overrule the reasons that you're doing it, then you're going to probably come across a little bit of friction there. And at the same time, if you don't think about why you want these things, why you want a leader or why you want to be a leader in a position, then you're not going to really direct your actions in a way that brings what you want, and you're just going to flail. And then, yeah, that's probably the bad situation that a lot of us find ourselves in.
Contradicting skills. Yeah, for sure. I super true. Oh my God. Being a leader for the right reasons. And like you said, I mean, because if you try to force your way upon other people that are already going through a smooth transition, it doesn't usually end up well. But if you try to share skills, like he was saying, with what you already kind of know and what they're kind of doing to kind of make things a little bit more efficient or better, it makes it much more smooth transition. I like that, Danny. That's really good. It's really, really good.
Hope that was helpful to people. Yeah.
Do you have any more questions on your end?
Have you met Bezos? I have not met Bezos. Not yet.
I heard he stepped down. Didn't he step down?
He's gonna step down, I think, in Q3 of this year.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I know there was rumors about him stepping down, but I wasn't sure if it was actually going to happen. But he's made more money than he's will ever spend or need. So okay, I think his kids will be fine with everything that he's made already. So
he lives in in a lake that's nearby here, like Lake Washington. He's got his house over there. Bill Gates has a house over there too.
Oh, wow.
These guys have yachts that they ride around in. So hopefully I got a sailboat now with my girlfriend, and hopefully we'll sail around and be like, hey, what up, Bezos?
Let me know when you get your house over there and I'll come visit.
There we go. We should pay them a visit.
Yeah, there you go. So there you go. Well, I know we don't have too much time, but we got about I would say about 7 to 10-ish minutes left, but I wanted to ask a little bit more on the Amazon aspect. So I know you talked a lot about your job or anything like that, and I want to thank you. I'm not sure if it was what you did, but the friend of mine that I asked about trying to get the internship, he actually got the internship with Amazon. So I'm not sure, because he was applying already, but I'm hoping that it came from you, because because he told me about it. I was like, yeah, let me tell my friend. I talked about it last week. So he's all set up for the summer, but.
Congratulations. Yeah. I'm gonna have to follow up with him and contact him once he gets on board. And,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and he took the plan. So he's actually going to be moving out to Seattle for the summer. Yeah. And it's hybrid still. He's only going to be in a couple of days and out a couple, how it works. But I want talking about internships and stuff like Amazon has to offer. Do you have any advice to some of my kids, what they should be kind of trying to do if they want to try to get an internship with Amazon, doing, not so much because he's a software engineer, not so much of that technical aspect, but how to kind of get in the door maybe?
So in general, I would say, and as a disclosure, I am most familiar with the technical aspects, right? And so the things that I'm going to allude to have to do with the processes I see there, right?
Sure.
Kind of like I did with the hypothetical business situation where I'm like, hey, how do we pay everyone? Here's your budget, go decide, right? I think it's really beneficial to recognize that every company has logistical aspects to it that they need to satisfy, right? Even for the things that sound really subjective and really cool or ambiguous, right? Like we're going to help humanity, right? Or we're gonna, diversity is really big right now. Like we're gonna bring in diverse hires and all this stuff. All these things translate to kind of these dry, practical steps, like recruiting events, like direct communications to organizations, right? If you use the practical aspects, the practical logistics of companies to determine where you're at, you will be at the place where they're trying to source people, right? So maybe that's especially for our people, right? Like maybe that's the Chicano group at your campus, right? Or that's what it was called back at USC for me. Maybe it's attending the Grace Hopper conference that I mentioned earlier, right? And just be in there, right? Like be at the places where if you think like, oh, where would some I don't want to be recorded as saying this. Where do the people who fit the demographic who typically are in these positions think that they will get people of diversity, right? Where do they think they're going to get it, right? It doesn't even matter if it's true. It's just where do they think they're going to go? And they're like, oh, yeah, we need to go to this conference. Be at that conference, right? Oh, it's going to be at this event. It's going to be through this channel, right? There's recruitment channels that companies use. They interact with groups on campuses. They interact with students through channels. Maybe the website is like the catch-all, right? So you start at the website. That can be the worst place, the worst way to apply somewhere, right? From there, you can only get better, right? They end up practical logistics, making some way so that they can interact with people at a college campus, right? They make it so that they have a LinkedIn group. They make it so that they have, Facebook did a really good job with this. For me, Facebook put out like a Latinos in tech kind of event, right? And they had that, and yeah, I had recruiters coming up to me like, oh, let me answer any questions about Facebook, right? That's the practical way that they expect to get people. So think about the companies you're going for. If you know someone there, ask them about the channels. What I'm telling you in terms of Amazon is we have a lot of active efforts to try and recruit from like university, from schools groups, from these conferences, right? There will be an Amazon stand, and this isn't just Amazon. When I was back at Blizzard, we had the Blizzard stand at the Game Developers Conference, right? There's these events in these places. One thing that was always a challenge for me is money, right? And unless y'all are, ballers, end up being way, of a, I don't know, like every y'all got phones and everything. It's like I didn't have a phone, but maybe that was just our age. But yeah, if money is an issue, then typically there will be other programs for people to attend these conferences, right? So the Grace Hopper conference, for example, there is absolutely a kind of financial aid sort of package there. Look up what that is. If you're interested in games, Game Developer Conference, go to that. If you're interested in finance, right, find out what the finance conference is, what the big finance groups are. Again, from an engineering perspective, there's the Society of Hispanic Engineers, which is a group that actively, connects people to this kind of activity, right? So go with groups that are fitting for your particular interest, right? And then apply through them, be present there. And there will always be the Blizzard stand, the Riot Games stand, the Amazon stand, the Google stand, the Facebook stand. They're usually having a presence there. And if they don't, then find a different group, right? Like, again, that just means that they're not connecting with those groups. And maybe it's the group's fault. Maybe the group isn't that legit and they're, trying, but whatever,
you can help them, or you can find out where is it, right? Where are they going to be next, right? And so for me, if you want an internship, go to your school's groups, ask if they have a direct connection to like the Amazon recruiters. I mean, all your class isn't in college yet, right? So that would be in the future. But that's how you end up fostering a path that will get you to an internship. Think of the practical aspects. Go to the places where you think they'll be. Even Twitter, right? Like Twitter and like these channels where companies are now like, oh yeah, we can use social media to accomplish these things. There's a stereotype that younger people are the masters of all these technologies, right? Like, so you all have access to these things. Like, start scrutinizing the companies. Like, be like, all right, are they doing it well? Cool. Where they're not doing it perfectly, you have enough information to identify where they're going to be. You have enough information to see what their channels are. They're probably tweeting out their campaigns that they're doing. They're like, oh, here's how we're improving this thing and this thing. Those almost always, unless they're bad at their jobs, will have a call to action at the end. It'll have something which is like, if you want to know more, X. If you want to know more, contact this. If you want to know more, join our group, join our event. Use those things.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. It's good advice, especially because I know, like my dad still has struggle, getting emails and stuff like that. And then, like, I'm not so much of a Twitter guy, but I know I got to get into it just to hear the more advice and stuff. And then like the whole TikTok era and everything. And I'm starting to feel left behind, like how my dad felt when I was trying to explain to him how to check his email and how to look for stuff that I sent him. So, and like you said, these new generations are masters of the time that's going on now. So it's definitely helpful. Use the tools you guys have that, that weren't available for us. Like, cause I didn't get a cell phone until I was in college, cause cell phones weren't around. And even then it was expensive to have a cell phone, and luckily for me, my mom pretty much paid it for me because I couldn't afford it at the time, cause I was working and school, rent, everything was expensive. So
yeah, I was definitely showing my age there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all good, man. I mean, I'm right there with you. So definitely. But I think that's pretty much about time we have. So I want to thank you again for coming out, spending your very valuable time to come help out my kids and share, and with Miss Completo's kids as well. And yeah, definitely thank you for taking the opportunity or giving us the opportunity to talk to you. Can we get some virtual claps for Danny? The virtual claps.
Yes, send my sketches to.
Yeah, send them to me. Yeah, I have some students in here that are like really into art. So all right, sweet deal. So once again, thank you again, Danny, and we'll keep I'll keep in touch. We'll have a chat after this about how this went and stuff. And we'll keep this going. But I'm still planning a trip to come see you, man. It's just with the vid, it's been kind of difficult with everything, but especially since I'm teaching online, as long as I can find a place that has Wi-Fi every day and I can make my way up there.
There we go.
Because I want to drive.
Solid plan. Solid plan. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Have a good one, Danny, and everyone else. That's the time. So you're welcome to take your break before your next class.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.